She handed me the cane with a smile too wide, her eyes too sharp. "A gift," my daughter-in-law said, "to help you walk better." I took it with a grateful nod. The years had crept into my bones, and every step came with a whisper of pain. A cane was practical, thoughtful, kind. But kindness doesn't come wrapped in cruelty. Later that day, as I sat by the window watching the wind play with the trees, she returned. No words, just a flash of movement. The cane she gave me, my cane, swung like a blade through the air, cracking hard against my shins. Once, twice. Pain flared like fire. I collapsed. "You're always in the way," she hissed. Always needing, always slowing us down. I lay there stunned, breathless, not from age, but from shock. Her footsteps faded down the hall as if nothing had happened. But I'm old, not helpless. I didn't survive wars, loss, and life's endless trials to be broken by a smile with a knife behind it. That night, I made a call. Quietly, deliberately. When she returned the next morning, cheerful and sugar-sweet, there was someone waiting at the door with a badge and a file full of statements. One from me, one from a neighbor who'd heard the shouting, one from a hidden camera I'd set up days before, because this wasn't the first time cruelty had worn a mask in my home. The cane she gave me still helps me walk. But now I walk alone, stronger, and free. Pain lingers longer when you pretend it doesn't exist. I sat in my chair for hours after she hit me, rubbing my shins through the wool of my slacks, trying to press the fire out of the bone. Not crying, not yelling, just thinking. She struck me with the very thing she gave me. That wasn't just cruelty, it was a message. You are mine to manage. You are mine to control. That night, I walked with the cane. Really walked with it. Slowly, leaning, pretending to be weaker than I was. She watched from the hallway. I could feel her eyes like cold fingers on my back. "You all right?" she asked, voice light as sugar. I nodded. Didn't look at her. Didn't speak. That silence unsettled her. I knew it. The next few days, she didn't raise a hand again. Not physically, but her weapons changed shape. She kept the thermostat low so my joints would ache. She forgot to cook dinner until late, then claimed I hadn't told her I was hungry. She laughed too loudly on the phone when she spoke about babysitting the relic. Subtle things. Cruel things. But I've been through worse. I've known men who cracked under the weight of silence far more than under fire. And I'd learned one thing in all my years. The ones who whisper threats are always more dangerous than those who shout. So I stayed quiet. I let the bruises bloom under my skin like storm clouds. I listened. And I took notes. Every day, I jotted down what she said, what she did, and when. I hid the notebook behind the loose panel in the hallway closet, the same one I'd hidden spare keys behind for years. I gave each day a name. Gray Tuesday. Frozen Friday. Hollow Sunday. I tracked everything. My son, bless his heart, never saw it. He worked late, came home exhausted, kissed her on the cheek, and asked me if I needed anything. He didn't see how she stiffened when I was in the room. How she'd walk around me like I was some diseased fixture. He believed in love, in peace. But love is no shield when the cruelty comes in whispers behind closed doors. One night, I woke to a sound, her voice through the air vent, on the phone with someone. "He's not gonna last much longer," she said, half laughing. "He's barely walking now. If we're lucky, this house will be ours before Christmas." That was the first night I allowed myself to feel anger. Real, focused anger. I wasn't just a burden to her. I was an obstacle. And obstacles she intended to remove. But I wasn't ready to be erased. It's a strange thing, preparing for battle from a recliner. I used to stand tall in uniform, boots polished, chest out, saluting commanding officers with pride. There were rules back then, codes of honor, lines not crossed. But here, in this quiet house with beige walls and smiling picture frames, the battlefield had no rules. Only silent ambushes. only traps behind soft words. I started preparing like I once did for patrols, methodically, patiently. I cataloged every sign of weakness, not mine, hers. I paid attention to the way she grew nervous when I stood in doorways too long. How she stiffened when I looked her in the eye. She liked power, yes, but only when it wasn't challenged. That was her weakness. The cane became my companion, but not in the way she intended. I tapped it softly in different parts of the house. Listening, feeling vibrations. Old habits never really leave a soldier. And eventually, I found it, a hollow spot in the wall behind the bookshelf. I pried it open one afternoon while she was out getting groceries. Inside, I placed my small camera, ordered quietly from an online shop using cash prepaid by a friend. It wasn't much. A tiny black dot, motion activated. But it saw what I needed it to see. I also installed an audio recorder under the dining table, taped flat. She'd always lean in when she spoke on the phone there. Laughing, mocking, plotting. The house became a weapon I turned against her. And yet, part of me mourned what this had become. I remembered the first time my son brought her home. She wore yellow. She laughed too loudly at my jokes. She made my boy look happy. What happened to that woman? Or had she always worn a mask? One evening, I watched her through the crack in the hallway as she poured a second glass of wine before dinner, something she never did before. Her hand trembled as she lifted it. That was new. I could smell fear. Later, I accidentally dropped my plate. Porcelain shattered on the hardwood floor. She came rushing in, fake concern all over her face. "Oh no! Are you okay?" I stood there, looking at the mess. Then up at her. "You don't have to pretend anymore," I said calmly. Her smile twitched. "Pretend what?" I didn't answer. I bent down and began picking up the shards. She stared at me for a few seconds, frozen. She knew. Something had shifted. The war had begun in earnest. The house was no longer just a home, it was a net, and I was quietly tightening the threads. It was amazing how much people gave away when they thought no one was listening. I learned that decades ago, reading lips through binoculars and picking up whispers across war zones. Surveillance wasn't always about wires and satellites. Sometimes it was about patience, stillness, observation. Now it was about survival. The little camera behind the bookshelf watched the living room, the ground she paced every night with a glass of wine and a phone in her hand. The audio recorder beneath the table caught everything she muttered into those whispered calls, complaints, plans, little venomous phrases spoken with the cold efficiency of someone used to getting what they wanted. "She's still looking at nursing homes," one of her friends said on a call. I could hear the other voice through the speakers. "He won't go willingly," she replied. But one more fall, just one, that might convince everyone. One more fall. My hand clenched around the arm of my chair. This wasn't a tantrum. This was strategy. Premeditated, cold as the grave. She wasn't just bullying me. She was trying to disappear me. So I gave her what she wanted, an old man bumbling around the house. I shuffled slower, missed steps on purpose. I waited for her to act, and all the while, the house watched her for me. She started to notice. A week after the dropped plate, I found her standing in my room, pretending to dust a shelf she never touched before. Her eyes scanned the room. "You've been different lately," she said. "Age changes a man," I replied, without looking up. She smiled. "Some people change for the better." I smiled back. "Some people just get better at hiding what they really are." Her expression barely changed, just the eyes. A flicker of fury, like a curtain fluttering before a storm. That night, she tore her room apart. I could hear drawers slamming, footsteps pounding, furniture shifting. She was looking for something, any hint of what I knew. But she wouldn't find it. I hid things like a soldier hides supplies, carefully with backup plans and redundancies. My recordings were uploaded daily to a cloud account she didn't know existed. A friend of mine across town had access to it. Even if I disappeared tomorrow, she wouldn't walk away clean. The next morning, I cooked breakfast. 2 eggs, toast, tea. Set the table. Waited. She entered the kitchen, surprised. "For you?" she asked. "For both of us," I said. "You've been tired lately. I thought I'd help." She looked at the food like it was poisoned. Trust is a powerful weapon. When it's broken, it becomes a shadow that follows you everywhere. She couldn't eat. She just stood there, fiddling with her ring. The house was mine now. The walls had eyes. The silence had memory. The traps were laid. Now I just needed her to step into one. People like her don't unravel in explosions, they come apart in tiny threads. One smile at a time. That morning, after she refused to touch the breakfast I made, I saw it. Her eyes darted across the table like she was searching for something invisible. Poison? A trap? A recording device? She didn't know what I had, but she knew I had something. The not knowing terrified her. And fear made her sloppy. By noon, she was cleaning. Obsessively. Cupboards she hadn't opened in years. Under the couch cushions. Behind picture frames. She was hunting for my eyes, the ones I'd hidden in the walls. She found none. But she found the hollow behind the hallway panel. She didn't realize it was a decoy. She pulled out the empty space, probably expecting a flash drive, or letters, or photographs, something she could destroy. But all she found was dust, a broken pencil, and an old chess piece, a white knight. I'd left it there on purpose. That afternoon, her voice was sharper than ever. No more sugarcoating. No more soft smiles. "I hope you're feeling all right," she said, standing behind me as I watched a documentary in the living room. "I feel clearer than I have in years." "That's good," she replied. "You should start thinking about the future." I didn't turn. "I already have." She walked off with a huff. The smile was gone now. What was left behind was raw. Ugly. Honest. For the first time in months, I felt her fear more than my own. That evening, my son came home early. She didn't expect that. He kissed her cheek and came to sit by me. He looked tired. "She says you've been acting strange," he said gently. I turned my head to him, calm. "Strange, how?" "She says you're paranoid. Maybe even confused. She's worried about you." There it was. The next phase of her plan. "Son," I said quietly, "if something ever happens to me, I want you to look behind the wall in the garage. There's a panel near the water heater. Use your phone to record what you find there. Even if it's nothing." He looked confused but nodded. "You okay, Dad?" I've never been sharper. He looked back toward the kitchen, where she stirred something in a pan, humming a tune that didn't match her mood. I watched the cracks in her mask grow. She wasn't in control anymore. She knew it. There's a line in the carpet between the hallway and the living room, a faint groove worn by years of footsteps. I used to think it was just the passing of time, the slow erosion of fabric under repetition. But now I see it differently. It's a boundary, an invisible trench. On one side, safety. On the other, war. I stood on one side of that line for nearly a week after my son's visit, watching her glide across it like a queen on a chessboard. Smiling, singing, pouring tea. And yet, every move she made was tighter, more deliberate. The cheer in her voice didn't match the hardness in her eyes. The performance was faltering. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know when. Then it happened, small but telling. I was folding a blanket in the living room when I heard a stumble behind me. She had dropped her phone on the stairs. It tumbled down and cracked on the hardwood. She stood there at the top step, frozen, her hand still out as if she hadn't decided whether to catch it or let it fall. "Clumsy," she muttered. "Easy mistake," I replied. Her lips thinned. The phone was likely her lifeline to friends, to whatever help she thought she might need. The broken screen was another chip off her armor. And she knew I saw it. That night, she tried to cross the line again. "You know," she said as I read quietly, "I've been thinking about assisted living communities. You'd meet new people, have activities, support. I looked up from my book. Thinking about moving? Her eyes narrowed. I meant for you. I closed the book gently. This is my house. She smiled, but not like before. This one was jagged. You think you're safe here? She whispered. Silence hung between us. A cold draft slithered under the baseboards. The shadows in the hallway stretched like long fingers. Do you? I asked softly. She turned and walked away. That was the moment. The line in the carpet was real now, drawn not by footsteps, but by resolve. She knew I wouldn't back down, and I knew she couldn't stop herself. The next day, I called George. He was a friend from the old days. Retired detective. The kind of man who never really put his badge down. It started, I told him. His voice was gravel. You have evidence? Tons. Good, he said. Then it's time. Time for what, exactly, I wasn't fully sure. Legal action? Intervention? Confrontation? But I knew one thing. The next step couldn't be mine alone. The war behind the wallpaper had become too dangerous for one man to fight in silence. George hadn't aged so much as hardened. His frame was leaner than I remembered, and the years had weathered his face like stone worn by rain. But his eyes, those gray, watchful eyes, hadn't changed a bit. He stepped into the house like he belonged there, nodding once at the hallway, once at the kitchen, like he was already reading the scene of a crime. She here? He asked, voice low. Out for errands. Won't be long. Good, he said, setting his old leather bag on the coffee table. Let's get started. I showed him everything. The footage, the audio files, the journal, the recordings I'd uploaded and encrypted online. He scrolled, listened, watched silent, unmoving, until the final clip where she laughed with her friend about me not lasting much longer. He leaned back slowly and exhaled. She's smart, he said finally. Calculating. This isn't rage, it's strategy. But she's slipping. I know, I said. He tapped the table. And you've done well. Most men would have cracked. Hell, most wouldn't even be believed. I looked him in the eye. Will I be? George smiled faintly. With what you've got? Yes. But we're going to do it clean. Legal. Ironclad. That was always George, never dramatic. No explosions. Just results. He explained his plan. We'd prepare a file for Adult Protective Services. Another for the police. Time-stamped footage. Witness statements, including one from a neighbor who'd seen the bruises. George would even reach out to my doctor for records of my injuries. All legal. All clean. He pulled out a mini camera, smaller than mine, with better resolution, and handed it to me. For the front hall, he said. Catch her as she comes and goes. Then he paused. You ready for this to get worse before it gets better? I nodded. Been living worse for months. He nodded back, but his eyes didn't leave mine. You're not just surviving, he said. You're fighting. Remember that. We shook hands, not gently, but like soldiers exchanging unspoken truths. She returned later that afternoon. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She saw George's empty tea mug on the table and narrowed her gaze. Company. Old friend, I said. From before. She looked around, but George was already gone. Like a ghost. That night, she paced more than usual. Checked the locks. Rearranged the fridge. Called her sister, but said almost nothing. The house was still watching her. And now, she wasn't just facing an old man with a cane and bruised legs. She was facing two old soldiers. And one of them had a badge in his past. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays, I'd learned, were when her nerves frayed the most. Maybe it was the long stretch between weekends. Maybe it was just the rhythm of her poison. That morning, I woke to the smell of burnt toast. A rare slip from her. She was careful about appearances, usually. When I entered the kitchen, she had her back turned to me, standing still, the toaster smoking beside her. You okay? I asked. She jumped slightly, not much, just enough for me to notice. Fine. She muttered. Just distracted. She didn't say by what. At 10:43 a.m., it happened. I was at the top of the stairs, about to descend, when she appeared behind me. Quiet. Too quiet. She said my name gently, almost kindly. I turned slightly, and in that second, her hand grazed my back. Not a push. Not forceful. Just a touch. But it was enough. My foot missed the edge. My weight shifted. I stumbled. I fell fast, uncontrolled, down 5 steps before my cane caught against the railing and saved me from a full descent. Pain exploded in my hip, and my shoulder slammed the banister, but I stopped myself before it got worse. She screamed. "Oh my God. Are you okay?" I didn't mean. She rushed down after me, voice frantic, hands trembling. To anyone else, it might have looked like concern. But I saw the delay, the flicker in her expression before she bent down. The absence of real panic. And in her eyes, something else entirely, disappointment. I didn't hit the bottom. I wasn't broken. But the camera caught it all, the hallway one George had installed just days before. From her entry to her reach. From my fall to her reaction. I let her help me up. Let her put on the performance. Let her call my son and say it was just an accident, that she was horrified. That she was crying. He came home early. Helped me to the chair. Looked at me with pain in his eyes. But I saw something else too. Doubt. I caught him alone later that evening and gave him a flash drive. "What's this?" he asked. "Just watch it," I said. "Then ask me again if it was an accident." He did. That night. He didn't speak when it ended. He just looked at me, hands shaking, breath short. She could have. I nodded. She would have, I said. If I'd fallen further. His silence was confirmation. Now he knew. Now he saw. The mask she wore for him had slipped too far this time. This wasn't going to be a private war anymore. There was a moment, just a moment, where I thought my son might lash out. He stood frozen in my study after watching the footage, fists clenched, jaw tight. The kind of stillness a man wears when the foundations of his life crack without warning. "She said you were confused," he whispered. "That you were forgetting things. That you were different." "I am," I said. "More careful. More awake." He looked at the floor. And then, slowly, he Saturday, "I can't believe it." "You can," I said. "Because you saw it?" The next few hours were quiet. Not heavy, focused. He asked questions. I answered. Everything. The bruises. The hits. The threats. The cane. By midnight, I'd given him full access to the cloud George helped me set up. Passwords. Backups. Notes. Audio logs. Things too painful to speak out loud. He didn't cry. He just nodded. "I'll handle it," he said. But I stopped him. "We'd do this clean. Legal. The right way. Or she plays the victim." He nodded again, slower this time. The rage was still there, but now it had direction. The next day, he called George himself. They spoke in short sentences. Cop talk. Strategists, not sons and fathers. By Thursday, I had more eyes in the house. A second camera, tucked under the front step. One in the carport. One outside my bedroom. But the biggest change? I wasn't alone anymore. The moment she noticed the difference was almost imperceptible. She came into the living room and found me reading, same as always, but this time my son was sitting beside me. Calm, protective, present. She hesitated. "You two having a little bonding time?" she asked with a smile so brittle it looked carved from ice. "No," I said, not looking up. "We're planning." She laughed nervously. "Planning what?" My son looked at her. "Next steps." The color drained from her face just enough to betray her. She knew. Not everything, but enough. She left the room quietly, but we heard the door slam upstairs a minute later. Heard her pacing. Heard drawers opening and shutting. "Is she looking for evidence?" my son asked. "She's looking for control," I said. "And it's gone." That night, George visited again, late, quiet, after she'd gone to bed. He met my son for the first time in years. "You've got your father's eyes," he said. "And now I see what he sees," my son replied. George laid it out clearly. Everything we had was damning. Enough for APS to investigate. Enough to trigger a protective order if she made one more move. "But we don't act yet," George warned. "We wait. The law works slow, but it only works once. So we don't give her a reason to run." Not yet. We agreed. The trap was set. The bait was her own fear. All we needed now was her next mistake. And she would make one. They always do when the shadows start watching back. By Friday, the garden was no longer a place of peace. It was a stage, and she didn't know the audience had arrived. She always took her calls outside. It was a habit, one born of control. She thought the wind, the trees, and the open space made her safe. She thought I wouldn't hear. She forgot what men like me learned long ago. The garden whispers louder than any room if you plant the right seeds. And I had. George's last drop-off had included something special, a soil-thin mic with directional range and vibration dampening, the kind of thing we used to bury under embassy patios. Hidden beneath the bird bath, it gave us everything. Every call, every lie, every plan. That morning, she stepped out with her coffee and her phone, wrapped in that same air of plastic calm. I watched from the window, not openly, but present. She glanced at the house once, then turned her back and began to speak. "He's acting like a martyr now," she said. "Sits there with that cane like he's a saint. I swear he's trying to trap me." A pause. "Yes, I know what it looks like. But I'm not stupid, I'm careful." Another pause, longer this time. "No, I didn't push him. He slipped. I touched his back, that's it. And maybe I should have done more. He just keeps hanging on. Like a damn ghost." There it was. Her almost confession. We recorded it, stored it, filed it with the rest. I forwarded it to George and marked it for the legal bundle. Inside, I brewed my tea and set the table. Calm, quiet. The chessboard of my house had shifted, and she didn't even realize she was standing in check. When she came back in, she was fidgeting, sweating slightly, despite the morning chill. She stopped in the kitchen and looked at me for a long time. "What?" I asked, sipping my tea. "Why are you always watching me?" she snapped. "I live here," I said, meeting her gaze. "And so do you." She slammed a cabinet shut and stormed out. But that crack, that visible loss of control, meant everything. She was feeling the heat. And when people like her start feeling watched, they panic. They press. They overstep. That's when justice moves in. That afternoon, I found the garden chair overturned. The bird bath slightly shifted. She was searching. She knew something was listening. But it was already too late. The wire in the garden had already delivered her guilt. Now, all I had to do was wait for her to hang herself with it. The knock on the door was slow, deliberate. Not the kind that begged entry, the kind that announced presence. I opened it and found Clara Patel standing there. 63 now. Hair silver, posture straighter than most women half her age. In another life, she was my neighbor. In another life, she was the only person who noticed when my late wife stopped waving from the porch. Now she was here again. Uninvited, unshaken, unapologetic. "I was in town," she said. "I've been hearing things." I stepped aside without asking what she meant. Clara didn't do small talk. She walked in and paused by the window, scanning the room like a seasoned officer entering hostile terrain. She noticed the cameras, the new hardware, my son's jacket on the armrest. "She knows?" Clara asked. I nodded. "And she knows I know." She turned to face me, her voice low. "And she still hasn't run?" "She's too arrogant." Clara smirked. "Good. That makes her careless." I offered tea. She declined. Saturday. Folded her hands. Then she told me about a woman she once cared for in hospice, an old friend, quiet and sharp, who had died with bruises no one talked about. Her son insisted it was the nurse. The nurse insisted it was clumsiness. But Clara had known. She'd seen the same darkness in that house. The same silence. She looked at me. "You're not the first," she said. "But you might be the first to live through it loudly." I didn't know what to say. She filled the pause for me. "I'm here to help. I'll testify. I'll write. I'll stand where you need me." I felt the weight of her words settle over the years I had lived in silence. Someone outside the house, outside the war, had chosen a side. And it was mine. That evening, Clara walked the garden with me. She asked about the cane, the one my daughter-in-law had gifted before turning it into a weapon. I let her hold it. She felt the weight of it. She understood. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. But I nodded anyway, because this story, I realized, was no longer just mine. Every hidden bruise, every whispered lie, they were part of something larger. A pattern. A plague that wore smiles and spoke gently while it poisoned. The war wasn't just for me now. It was for all the others too afraid to speak. Clara left before sundown, but she left something behind. Strength. Memory. A reminder that truth doesn't rot in silence, it sharpens. And mine was nearly ready to cut. Everyone hides something in a drawer. Old letters. Pills. Receipts never filed. Proof of who they were or who they pretend to be. She kept hers in the bedroom. Second dresser, third drawer down. She always locked it with a tiny silver key she wore on a necklace tucked under her blouse, right beside her heart. A neat little irony. For months, I'd left that drawer alone. But now she was gone on an overnight visit to her sister. My son was nearby. George had given the go-ahead. And I had waited long enough. It wasn't hard to open. George had taught me how to slip that kind of lock years ago when we used to play detective as boys. A simple torque wrench and a rake pick did the job in seconds. Inside, I found a burner phone, dusty, but not dead. Call history wiped, but not completely. A few numbers still saved. None labeled. A set of photos of me, mostly, sitting in the garden, asleep in the chair, eating in the kitchen. Nothing criminal. But voyeuristic. Chilling. Like a hunter cataloging prey. A folded note, handwritten in her distinct looping cursive. He's slower now. A few more months, maybe less. If he won't sign the new will, I'll have to find leverage. Can you help? No signature. No date. Just the words. An envelope thicker than the rest. Inside it, a revised version of my will. Not in my handwriting. Forged. With my name and signature shaky but nearly convincing. I sat there for a long time, breathing in shallow bursts. It wasn't just abuse anymore. It was premeditated. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to inherit me. George's voice echoed in my memory. People like this don't want control. They want the whole estate. This drawer was her blueprint. A quiet, calculated endgame where I would vanish in stages, a fall here, a confused decision there, until I was either in a home or under the ground, and she held the deed, the checkbook, the narrative. But now I had the evidence. Photographed. Backed up. Duplicated. Sent to my son before I even shut the drawer again. When she returned that night, she didn't know. She made tea. She smiled. She asked if I wanted to sit in the garden. I did. I let her walk in front of me this time, because now the real cane wasn't in my hand. It was the truth I carried. And it was heavy enough to break everything. It started with a dropped fork. Not mine, hers. A quiet clatter during dinner, the kind of thing people laugh about. But I didn't laugh. Neither did she. She stared at the metal on the floor like it had insulted her. Then she looked up at me. "You could have picked it up," she snapped. "I didn't drop it," I replied. Her hands clenched. A twitch in her jaw. For weeks, she'd worn the mask carefully, a smile here, a gentle word there. But pressure cooks even the most patient monster. You sit there like you're king of the damned, she said, voice tight. Like I owe you something. You owe me nothing, I said calmly. But you don't get to rewrite what you've done. She stood, breathing shallow. You know what? You're not a victim. You've always been difficult. Always making me the villain. Poor old man, limping around like life cheated you. No, I said, I study. You cheated me. And that was it. The fire ignited. She shouted, words sharp as shattered glass. Accusations. Lies. She called me a burden. A parasite. A manipulator. Her voice cracked like a whip through the walls of the house. You think your son's going to choose you, she screamed. You think you'll get sympathy because you're old and fragile? They'll lock you in a home and forget you. You're already fading. I didn't flinch. I didn't have to, because the house was listening. Every word caught on tape, on mic, on 3 separate devices feeding to 3 separate clouds. I let her rage until her voice wore out, until she stood panting, eyes wild, face flushed with the effort of holding back the second slap she'd wanted to deliver since she saw me smile. When she was done, I stood, took my cane in one hand, and said the only thing that mattered. They heard you. She froze. Who? I took a step forward. Everyone who needs to. My son stepped into the room, silent until now. His phone in his hand. Call still active. The blinking red light unmistakable. I've been listening the whole time, he said. She looked between us, eyes wide. The blood drained from her face. You tricked me, no, I said. You revealed yourself. She ran upstairs. We let her. There was nothing left for her to control now. No more silence. No more fear. The fire in her voice had lit her own fuse. And justice, long cold, long buried, was burning toward her fast. They arrived at 9:17 a.m. Sharp, 2 women, one tall and soft-spoken, the other younger, more rigid, with the energy of someone who'd read every case file 3 times before knocking. Their badges were real. Their expressions? Careful. I met them at the door with my son standing just behind me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to speak quietly. I'm Vikram, I said. We've been expecting you. They stepped inside. She was still upstairs. She hadn't come down since the night she screamed the walls to life. I'd heard her pacing all morning, but the sound had changed. No longer angry. Nervous. Light. Like she didn't want the house to hear her now. But it was too late. We led the investigators into the living room. George had prepared a folder for us, digital backups and printed summaries, color-coded. Audio timestamps. Footage logs. The revised will. The drawer contents. The garden recording. Everything. The younger one, Morrison, began reviewing instantly. Her eyes narrowed the farther she read. The older one, Delgado, sat beside me. Mr. Vikram, she said, do you feel safe here? No, I answered honestly. But I feel safer now than I did last month. She nodded. You've documented extensively. That's good. Most people never get that far. Most people don't have help, I said. I was lucky. Delgado's face softened. You were prepared. That's when the footsteps came. Slow. Hesitant. She entered the room with her best mask on, hair brushed, face calm, voice gentle. Oh, she said, pretending surprise. Is this? We're with Adult Protective Services, Morrison cut in. We're here about a report of potential abuse and coercive control. Her smile flickered, just slightly, but recovered. Oh, she said again. I see. I didn't expect. You'll have time to respond, Delgado said. But first, we need to ask Mr. Vikram some questions. Alone. She turned to me, eyes pleading now. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. My answer, I said clearly, will be the same whether you're in the room or not. She didn't move. My son stepped between us. She left the room. And for the next hour, I spoke freely. I told them everything. Slowly, without anger, just fact after fact. The bruises, the threats, the moments in the dark. The cane, The fall, the drawer, the recording in the garden. They listened without interruption. They took notes. And when I was finished, Delgado simply said, "You've done everything right." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But I also felt seen for the first time in a long, long while. They informed her that a temporary order of protection was being filed, that she would not be allowed in the house unsupervised during the investigation, that all contact with me would go through a third party. Her face, for once, didn't lie. She was shocked. She thought it would never come to this, that I would always be just a shadow in the corner of her story. But now, I was the story. And she was finally in it as the antagonist the world had refused to name until now. She didn't leave right away. That was the first surprise. The second was how polite she became. Overnight, she transformed. The woman who once raised her voice like a whip now floated through the house like a ghost in pearls. She offered tea, folded laundry she hadn't touched in years, asked with syrup tones, "Do you need help with that, Vikram?" I never answered, and I never let her be alone with me again. My son stayed full-time now. George rotated in every evening. Clara even returned, not to fight, just to sit. A calm presence, a witness. I called them my quiet sentinels. She knew she was being watched, monitored, logged, and yet she stayed. Desperation doesn't always look like pleading. Sometimes it looks like performative grace. An attempt to rewrite the story just before the final page. But it was too late. The order from Adult Protective Services had been filed. A hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks. In the meantime, a caseworker visited daily. The police made wellness calls. Even the neighbors, the same ones who used to nod blankly from their porches, started glancing longer, more carefully, when they saw her pull out of the driveway. The silence, the social shield she had once weaponized, was gone. That's when the storm finally hit. It was just past 1 a.m. I was awake, not from fear anymore, but habit. The kind of habit that builds when you've lived too long under someone else's moods. I sat in my chair in the hallway, listening, breathing, and then footsteps. Fast, heavy, slamming doors, drawers being pulled out too hard. She was packing. My son stepped out from his room just as I reached the staircase. We both looked down and saw her in the entryway, tossing clothes into a duffel bag. Her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. "She's trying to run," my son whispered. But she wasn't just fleeing, she was spiraling. "I'm not staying in this house to be treated like a criminal," she hissed, not even trying to be quiet. "After everything I've done for him? After what I gave up? You gave me bruises," I said from the top of the stairs. "You gave me silence." She spun. "You were never grateful. Never. Not once. I took care of this place while you hit me," I said simply. "That's all they'll hear now. Because it's true." Her face twisted into something I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not guilt. Panic. She dropped the duffel. "I'll fix it," she whispered. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding." "I'll say I was overwhelmed. I've already told them everything," I said. And they believed me. That broke something in her. She sank to the floor. And for a moment, she was the one shaking. The one silent. The one without power. She didn't cry. She collapsed. My son called the authorities. They arrived in 15 minutes. She left in the back of a cruiser, not in cuffs, not yet, but under supervision. Her car stayed behind. The house, after she was gone, felt cold. Not because she had left, but because her absence removed a weight I had grown used to carrying. We turned off the lights, locked the door, and, for the first time in a year, I slept through the night. No Cain beside me, no fear behind me, only silence. And the quiet promise that justice was not just possible, it was here. The courthouse smelled like paper and disinfectant, the scent of bureaucracy, of systems too slow for the wounds they claimed to heal. But I was there, sitting upright, cane in hand, tie too tight, heart steady. My son sat beside me, Clara one row behind. George had taken the day off work and wore his badge on his belt, even though he was off duty, not as a warning, but as a promise. She entered 5 minutes late. Hair perfect, outfit professional, not a single crack on her surface. But her eyes betrayed her. She scanned the room too quickly, avoided mine. The judge, an older woman named Travers, didn't waste time. This is a preliminary hearing regarding Mr. Vikram Singh and allegations of elder abuse, financial coercion, and intentional physical harm. Both parties will have a chance to speak, but I've reviewed initial filings and received direct evidence. She glanced at my daughter-in-law, including audio and video recordings, witness statements, and material documentation of altered legal documents. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, "Ms. Kaur, do you wish to respond?" And just like that, the performance began. She wept without tears, told stories about stress, caretaking, misunderstandings. She claimed I had become paranoid, confused, easily frightened, that I was imagining things. It was a carefully crafted story, but it collapsed the moment the recordings played. There, in clear sound, she called me a burden. There, in crystal audio, she threatened to find leverage. And there, in the still, silent garden, she screamed that no one would believe me. The courtroom did. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't read a statement. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at the judge and told her the truth. I loved her like family, I said. She treated me like a problem. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But peace only comes when the hurting stops. And it didn't stop until I spoke. Silence followed, the kind that comes after a stone hits water and everyone watches the ripples. Judge Travers leaned forward. "Mr. Singh," she said, "thank you. You've shown strength not often seen in these proceedings. You documented what many are too afraid to name. And because of that, you will be protected." She turned to my daughter-in-law. "The court is issuing a full protective order. You will not be permitted within 500 feet of Mr. Singh. You are barred from managing his finances, healthcare, or estate. You will surrender all house keys, and Adult Protective Services will retain monitoring rights during the ongoing criminal investigation." My daughter-in-law didn't argue. She just sat there, still and small, as her empire of intimidation finally collapsed under the weight of truth. As we walked out, George said, "You didn't just win, Dad. You saved yourself." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. Like stepping out from under a shadow I had convinced myself was the sky. That night, I lit a candle. For my wife. For the years I stayed quiet. And for everyone still waiting for their day in the light. Because that day can come. It just starts with one word: enough. It was strange how loud the birds sounded now. Every morning for years, I had heard them through the window, or rather, noticed them. But I hadn't really listened. Not when the mornings were filled with the sound of tension, footsteps like thunder, or voices tiptoeing between resentment and rage. Now I heard the birds, and they sang freely. The days began differently too. No shouting. No watching the clock for when she'd wake up, or worse, come home. No pretending to nap just to avoid conversation. My mornings were now slow, deliberate mine. I got up when I wanted, made my own tea, read the paper, not scanning headlines for distraction, but because I cared again. Clara started visiting every other day. George would come by to talk cricket or fix something, even if nothing needed fixing. Sometimes, we just sat in silence, the good kind. The kind that said, "You're safe here now." I got a new cane too, one I picked up myself. Polished wood, lighter than the old one, with a handle shaped like a hawk's head. Not a weapon, a companion. It reminded me of who I still was. Not a victim, not a frail old man, but a survivor, scarred, yes, but unbroken. Adult Protective Services continued their wellness checks, but they grew less formal over time. One of the workers, Samira, even started bringing me small cuttings from her garden: basil, mint, once even a rosebud. We talked more than we were supposed to. Once, she asked me, "Do you ever wish you'd done something sooner?" I paused, then answered honestly, "No. I wish I'd never needed to." She understood. There was one afternoon, maybe 2 weeks after the hearing, when I sat outside with a cup of chai. The sun was warm but not cruel, and the wind was kind to my skin. I thought about all the moments I'd let slip past while shrinking from her temper. And I promised myself no more fading. The new routine wasn't just about freedom from her. It was about returning to me. I started writing again, letters mostly. Notes to friends I hadn't seen in years. Thank you cards to the investigators. A letter to my wife, folded and left beneath her photo. Sometimes grief still sat beside me, but it no longer sat on me. And at night, when the lights went out, I didn't brace myself for footsteps or doors slamming. I didn't sleep with one eye half open. I just slept. Because peace isn't dramatic. It's quiet and steady, like birds in the morning, like tea without tension, like a man who finally lives without fear. I hadn't really looked in a mirror in months. Oh, I glanced. To shave, to check for stains, but not looked. Not in the way that reveals more than just skin. It happened on an ordinary morning. I was brushing my teeth when I paused. Something in the light, maybe? Something in the way the room felt. A little brighter, a little emptier, but in a freeing way. I lifted my chin and stared. My face had changed. The bruises were gone, of course. Time had erased the surface damage. But what remained was more subtle. A softening around the eyes, a quiet set to the jaw, a kind of peace that felt earned. I looked older, but not in a way that felt tragic, in a way that felt real, a survivor's face. I touched the corner of my eye where the skin creased into deep lines. Not sadness, not anger, just life. There were days, during the worst of it, when I thought I'd disappear, not in a dramatic way, but slowly, quietly. With every ignored insult, every unspoken protest, every moment I told myself it's not that bad. But now I saw something else. I saw a man who had not let himself vanish. A man who, in his own quiet rebellion, recorded the truth, held on to his dignity, waited for the right moment, and when it came, he acted. The mirror didn't show a hero. It showed a man who had stopped letting others define what survival looked like. Later that day, I found an old photo album tucked in the back of the bookshelf. Pictures of my youth. My wife and I in Delhi before the move. My son in his first school uniform. Clara with her wild hair and stubborn grin. I added something new to that album. Not a photo, but a letter. A folded page I wrote that night. It said, "I am still here, and I still matter. No one gets to erase me quietly again." Because mirrors only reflect what you're willing to face. And I was finally ready to face it all, past, present, and what little future I still had left. And for the first time in years, the man staring back at me, he looked proud. It came in the form of a letter. No return address. No official stamp. Just my name written in careful, familiar cursive on a cream-colored envelope. My son handed it to me while I was pruning the potted tulsi plant near the back window. "She dropped it off," he said. "Didn't stay. Said it was for you to read, or not." I didn't open it immediately. I stared at it, felt its weight. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind she always insisted made things feel more serious. Formal. Even apologies, apparently. It stayed on my desk for 3 days. On the 4th morning, I opened it. The handwriting was neat, rehearsed. But the words were jagged. "Vikram, I know you hate me. Maybe you should. Maybe I deserve it." I don't know how to explain what I did, except to say I was drowning in a life I didn't choose. And instead of swimming, I pulled others down with me. I didn't hit you because I hated you. I hit you because I didn't know how else to feel powerful. That's not an excuse. I know I'm not welcome. I know what I did is unforgivable. But if there's any part of you that can believe I'm trying to change, I'd like to talk. Once. Just once. In public. Safe. If not, I understand. I'll stay away. S. I folded the letter, then unfolded it again. I stared at the words. Then I walked outside and sat on the back bench. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was undecided. Closure is a tricky thing. People think it means a final conversation, a handshake, an apology accepted or denied. But sometimes, closure is a locked door, a silence earned. I called Clara. Read the letter to her. She didn't tell me what to do. She just listened, then said, "Whatever choice you make it for you. Not for her. Not for justice. Not for anyone's idea of forgiveness. For you." I sat with that. And I realized something. I didn't need a conversation to feel whole. I didn't need her regret to validate my pain. And I didn't need to prove anything by sitting across from the woman who once turned a gift into a weapon. I had already won. By surviving. By speaking. By healing. The next morning, I walked to the canal bridge where I used to feed the ducks with my wife. I held the letter over the railing and let the wind take it. No rage. No drama. Just release. The circle didn't close with a confrontation. It closed with a quiet, private act of power, the power to walk away. It was a warm evening when I brought out the old cane. The original one, the polished teak staff my daughter-in-law had gifted me so many months ago. The same cane she had later wielded as a weapon, cracking it against my legs, thinking it would break more than just bone. I had kept it, not out of sentiment, but because something inside me refused to discard it. It had become a symbol, not of pain, but of endurance, of everything I survived. Now I stood on the back porch, cane in one hand, shears in the other. The bougainvillea needed trimming. A simple chore. The kind no one ever noticed, yet that made everything feel a little more alive. My balance was better now. My steps more sure. The bruises long faded. The fear long gone. I wasn't the same man who first hobbled under another person's control. And I wasn't a victim anymore, either. I was just a man in his garden, doing something with his own hands. I sat when I was tired, walked when I wanted, spoke when I chose, and laughed more than I used to, even if just at birds fighting over a scrap of bread or at George pretending to understand classical music on the radio. The cane leaned against the wall beside me, not as a crutch, not as a threat, but as a choice. A reminder of how something meant to help can become a tool of harm, and how something used to hurt can be taken back, reshaped, reclaimed. I eventually mounted it above the mantel, beside a photograph of my wife. Not out of bitterness, but as a quiet declaration. This, too, is part of my story. But it does not define it. One day I know I'll leave this house for the last time. The world will go quiet. The plants will keep growing. The cane will still hang there, silent and unmoving. And maybe someone will ask about it. And maybe someone will say, "That belonged to Vikram. He survived something. Then he lived." Because that's what this story truly became. Not one of revenge, but of return, to peace, to self, to life.